In an era when smartphones have become extensions of our hands and social networks a part of everyday life, the problem of bullying has acquired a new digital dimension. Cyberbullying is not just a modern version of playground conflicts. It is a phenomenon with unique characteristics and devastating consequences. According to recent studies, 1 in 3 teenagers worldwide has experienced online aggression, and 70% of young people have witnessed online bullying. Digital violence knows no geographical boundaries, does not end with the school bell, and leaves an indelible mark in the virtual space. It is particularly alarming that the pandemic and forced isolation have led to a 45% increase in this phenomenon. Behind the dry figures lie real human tragedies: depression, anxiety disorders, cases of self-harm, and even suicidal attempts. Digital violence is not just unpleasant comments. It is a systemic problem requiring a comprehensive approach to its solution. Digital bullying, like a chameleon, takes on various forms, each leaving its unique imprint on the victim's psyche. Trolling is the most common form, where an aggressor intentionally provokes an emotional reaction through offensive comments. Hating goes further. It's systematic harassment aimed at a specific person, often accompanied by a wave of negativity from many users simultaneously. Doxing is particularly dangerous, the publication of personal information without consent, turning a virtual threat into a real danger. Sexting becomes a weapon of blackmail when intimate materials are distributed without consent, destroying the victim's reputation and psychological well-being. Cyberstalking is obsessive harassment in the digital space, creating a constant feeling of danger and insecurity. What makes digital bullying particularly destructive? First and foremost, anonymity. Hiding behind a screen, aggressors feel impunity, allowing them to cross boundaries they would never cross in person. The second aspect is publicity. Humiliation occurs in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands of witnesses, greatly amplifying the traumatic effect. And finally, the permanence of the digital footprint. Unlike words that can be forgotten, offensive content can exist online for years, turning a single episode of bullying into an endless torment. The victim cannot simply move to another school or change jobs. Digital harassment overcomes any physical barriers. This omnipresence deprives the victim of a safe space, a place to hide from aggression, which fundamentally distinguishes online harassment from traditional bullying. Why do we become different people when we go online? This question lies at the heart of understanding the psychological mechanisms of online aggression. The online disinhibition effect is a key phenomenon that transforms ordinary people into digital aggressors. Behind a computer screen, we don't see the immediate reaction of the interlocutor. No tears, no pain in their eyes. This invisibility of emotional response destroys the natural mechanisms of empathy that, in the real world, restrain us from harming others. A person, as it were, loses a part of their moral competence when interacting through a digital interface. De-individuation is another powerful psychological mechanism. Hiding behind an avatar or an anonymous account, people feel a blurring of personal identity. In this state, self-control decreases, and with it, the sense of personal responsibility for their actions. This is why in anonymous forums and comments, we observe the most toxic manifestations of human nature. The diffusion of responsibility amplifies this effect. When dozens of people participate in bullying, each feels only a small fraction of guilt for the overall outcome. Thus, the phenomenon of the online mob is born, where individual ethics dissolve into collective action. The echo chamber effect also plays a special role, where aggressors find support among like-minded individuals, which further legitimizes their behavior. The psychological profile of a digital aggressor is ambiguous. These are not always people prone to violence in real life. Often, These are those who experience frustration, seek power or attention, compensate for their own complexes, or simply follow the group norms of a toxic community. Understanding these mechanisms is the first step towards creating a healthier digital culture, where technologies serve as a tool for connecting, not dividing, people. Digital bullying leaves deep wounds in the victim's psyche, often invisible to others, yet no less devastating than physical injuries. When insults and threats arrive through a smartphone screen, their psychological impact is amplified manifold by the peculiarities of virtual space. Studies show that victims of cyberbullying experience a whole spectrum of emotional reactions, from initial shock and denial to deep anxiety that gradually permeates all spheres of life. A constant sense of insecurity becomes their faithful companion, for the attack can recur at any moment, on any platform, without warning. This forms a state of chronic stress that slowly but inexorably destroys the individual's psychological defenses. It is particularly alarming that 80% of teenagers who have experienced digital bullying report a significant decrease in self-esteem, and more than half experience symptoms of depression of varying severity. Digital trauma differs from traditional forms of psychological traumatization in its omnipresence. The victim cannot escape persecution, even when physically safe in their own home. The virtual nature of aggression does not make the pain any less real. On the contrary, public humiliation and loss of control over personal information create a unique pattern of traumatization, requiring specialized approaches to treatment. Many develop what is called digital paranoia, a constant fear of checking messages, a painful reaction to notifications, an obsessive desire to control their digital footprint. In severe cases, the psychological consequences of cyberbullying can take the form of post-traumatic stress disorder, with characteristic flashbacks, avoidance behavior, and emotional numbness. The most dangerous aspect is suicidal thoughts, which arise in every third victim of systematic online bullying, especially during adolescence, when psychological defense mechanisms are not yet fully formed. In the digital world, not all users are equally protected from aggression. Research shows that certain social groups are targeted by cyberbullying significantly more often than others. Teenagers, aged 12 to 17, are in the highest risk zone. Over 70% of digital bullying cases fall precisely into this age category. Why? At this age, identity is formed, and social acceptance plays a critical role. The digital space becomes an extension of school hierarchy, where status and reputation determine one's position within the group. Adolescents who differ from the majority are particularly vulnerable, whether by appearance, hobbies, academic success, or lack thereof. Representatives of various minorities face double pressure: general teenage bullying and discrimination based on their identity. Statistics are relentless. LGBTQ+ teenagers are 3 times more likely to be victims of systematic cyberbullying than their peers. Ethnic minorities, especially in polarized societies, also regularly experience online aggression. Public figures, from aspiring bloggers to well-known cultural figures, constitute another vulnerable category. Paradoxically, it is precisely those who actively develop their online presence who most often suffer from its toxic manifestations. Women in the public sphere face specific forms of bullying, including sexualized threats and comments about their appearance instead of discussions of their professional qualities. Among protective factors, researchers highlight strong social connections in the real world, emotional family support, developed digital literacy skills, and critical thinking. That is why digital bullying prevention programs must be targeted, taking into account the specific risks of different groups and aimed at strengthening precisely those protective mechanisms that a particular community lacks. Legislation in the field of combating digital bullying is in an active formation stage worldwide. In different countries, we observe various approaches to regulating this problem. The United States employs a fragmented approach. Over 40 states have adopted anti-cyberbullying laws, but their content and degree of protection vary significantly. The European Union is moving towards the unification of legal norms through the General Data Protection Regulation, which grants citizens the right to erase personal information, the so-called right to be forgotten. Australia has gone even further, creating the position of an e-safety commissioner with real powers to remove harmful content and impose fines on platforms. South Korea has introduced mandatory identity verification for users of large online platforms, aiming to reduce online anonymity. However, law enforcement in the digital environment faces serious obstacles. The cross-border nature of the internet creates jurisdictional conflicts. Who should hear a case if the aggressor and victim are in different countries? Anonymity complicates the identification of offenders, and encryption technologies and VPNs allow bypassing geographical restrictions. A particular challenge is the balance between freedom of speech and protection from harassment. Where is the line between permissible criticism and cyberbullying? How can vulnerable groups be protected without creating censorship mechanisms? These questions have no simple answers and require a fine-tuning of legal instruments. A promising direction for the development of legislation is cooperation with technology companies. Instead of direct prohibitions, states are increasingly requiring platforms to implement effective moderation mechanisms and prompt responses to complaints. This approach recognizes that in the digital world, legal regulation must be complemented by industry self-regulation and technological solutions. In the digital age, combating online bullying requires not only social and legal measures, but also technical solutions. Modern tools offer promising opportunities for creating a safer online space. Machine learning algorithms have learned to recognize potentially offensive content, even before it is published. Such preventive filters analyze text for aggressive expressions, insults, and threats, prompting the user to reconsider the message before sending it. Research shows that such a pause for thought reduces the number of aggressive comments by 30%. Early bullying detection systems go further, tracking not only individual messages, but also interaction patterns between users. They can identify systematic bullying even when each individual message does not contain explicit insults. Moderation tools automate the complaint processing, allowing for prompt responses to problematic situations. However, technological solutions are not without limitations. Automatic systems often fail to grasp cultural context, irony, or sarcasm, leading to both false positives and the oversight of real bullying cases. It is especially difficult to detect bullying in visual content, images, and videos. Ethical issues also remain unresolved. Where does the line between user protection and censorship lie? How deep should the monitoring of private messages be? How can the transparency of algorithms be ensured without revealing methods that could be used to circumvent them? The most promising approach is hybrid systems, combining automated filtering with human moderation. Technologies perform initial screening, while humans make final decisions in complex cases, constantly training the algorithms. Such a symbiosis allows for maintaining a balance between effectiveness and ethics. Social networks, gaming platforms, educational portals, all of them have become an integral part of our digital reality. It is on their territory that the main scenarios of online aggression unfold, and it is they who possess the greatest potential for solving the problem. The policies of large platforms regarding bullying have evolved from complete non-interference to active counteraction. Facebook and Instagram have implemented systems for filtering offensive comments and warnings before publishing potentially aggressive content. YouTube has re-engineered moderation algorithms to more quickly identify organized harassment in comments. Twitter has launched a feature to limit replies to posts, giving users more control over interactions. However, behind these initiatives lies a fundamental contradiction. The commercial interests of platforms often conflict with their social responsibility. User engagement is a key success metric for the advertising model, and emotionally charged, even negative content, generates the most activity. This creates a paradoxical situation where platforms simultaneously combat toxicity and indirectly profit from it. Among the successful initiatives, the experience of the gaming industry stands out. Riot Games, creators of League of Legends, implemented the tribunal system, where players themselves participate in evaluating toxic behavior. This reduced manifestations of aggression by 25%. Educational platforms have taken the path of preventive measures, integrating digital ethics modules directly into educational courses. However, existing problems remain significant. Insufficient transparency of moderation processes, uneven protection for different linguistic communities, and slow reaction to new forms of bullying. The future of safe platforms lies in a balance between technological solutions, human moderation, and educational initiatives. Creating a safe digital environment requires a systemic approach that unites the efforts of all participants in online interaction. The formation of a positive digital culture begins with educational institutions, where digital literacy programs should be implemented with an emphasis on ethical behavior. Studies show that schools that have included regular digital ethics classes in their curriculum report a 37% decrease in online aggression cases during the academic year. The key principle of such programs is not just prohibitions, but the formation of internal value orientations that allow students to independently assess the ethics of their online behavior. At the family level, it is important to create an atmosphere of open dialogue about digital safety. Parents who demonstrate involvement in their children's digital lives without excessive control become the first resource of support when encountering online aggression. Communities, be they gaming clans, thematic forums, or social media groups, can implement self-regulation systems where participants themselves define and maintain interaction norms. Successful online communities often use a positive reinforcement model, where constructive behavior receives visible approval and recognition. Opinion leaders and moderators play a special role, their examples setting the tone for all interactions. Studies show that communities with clear, fair rules and consistent moderation demonstrate 62% fewer toxic interactions than platforms with minimal regulation. When a person falls victim to digital bullying, psychological assistance becomes critically important. Cognitive behavioral therapy has proven to be one of the most effective methods for addressing the consequences of online harassment. This approach helps victims recognize and alter negative thought patterns that have arisen as a result of the traumatic experience. The therapist works with irrational beliefs, often formed in victims, such as, "I deserved this," "Everyone hates me," "I will never be safe." Gradually, these destructive thoughts are replaced with more realistic and constructive ones. Specialists note that approximately 70% of patients show significant improvement in their condition after 12 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy. Support groups create a safe space where victims can share their experiences with people who have gone through similar situations. The realization that you are not alone in your pain has a powerful therapeutic effect. In such groups, participants not only receive emotional support, but also exchange practical strategies for overcoming the consequences of harassment. Working with digital trauma has its own specifics. Therapists use desensitization techniques that help reduce anxious reactions to digital triggers, notification sounds, opening certain applications or web pages. An important component is restoring a sense of control over the digital space through training in safety tools, and a gradual return to positive online experiences. A particular challenge is the accessibility of specialized help. Many psychologists and psychotherapists lack sufficient training to work with digital trauma, and specialized programs remain rare. The situation is complicated by stigmatization. Many victims, especially men and teenagers, do not seek help due to shame or fear of being misunderstood. The solution could be the development of online counseling and anonymous support lines, allowing for primary care without overcoming the psychological barriers of traditional specialist consultation. Education is becoming our main weapon in the fight against digital aggression. Digital literacy programs, implemented in schools worldwide, are changing the landscape of online interaction. Finland, a recognized leader in educational innovations, has integrated critical thinking and media literacy modules into all subjects of the school curriculum. The results are impressive. Over 3 years, the level of cyberbullying has decreased by 38%. A key element of successful educational initiatives is the emphasis on empathy. When children learn to recognize the emotions of their interlocutor, even without visual cues, they are less likely to resort to aggressive behavior. Interactive simulations, where students find themselves in the role of bullying victims, foster a deep understanding of the consequences of online harassment. Conflict resolution skills development programs teach teenagers to resolve disputes constructively, without escalating aggression. Peer mediation methods, where school children themselves act as mediators in conflicts, are particularly effective. Research shows that schools with active mediation programs record 45% fewer cases of cyberbullying. Early intervention plays a crucial role. The Australian initiative Digital Defenders works with primary school children, forming healthy online habits before their first encounter with aggression. It is noteworthy that the most successful programs are not limited to working with potential victims, but actively involve witnesses. Teaching safe intervention strategies transforms passive observers into active allies against bullying. Technology companies also contribute by developing educational platforms with gamification elements, making learning digital ethics engaging. Envisioning a future free from digital violence, we must recognize that technology will continue to develop at a rapid pace, creating both new risks and new opportunities. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the Internet of Things, all these innovations are shaping tomorrow's digital landscape. How do we ensure safety in this changing world? The answer lies in a comprehensive approach that unites the efforts of all stakeholders. Users need to develop digital awareness, the ability to critically evaluate information, understand the mechanisms of technology's influence on the psyche, and actively protect their boundaries in the virtual space. Technology platforms must move from reactive incident response to proactive security design, where ethical principles are embedded at the development stage. The principle of ethics by default should become an industry standard. Educational institutions are called upon to integrate digital ethics into all aspects of learning, shaping a generation for whom respectful online behavior is as natural as in real life. Legislators face the complex task of creating flexible legal frameworks that protect users without stifling innovation and freedom of expression. International cooperation becomes critically important. Digital threats do not recognize state borders. Special attention should be paid to the protection of children and adolescents. Their brains are still developing, making them particularly vulnerable to negative online experiences. Parents and educators should not just restrict access to technology, but actively foster healthy digital habits. Researchers note that families where technology is used consciously, with clear rules and open discussion of risks, raise children with a high level of digital resilience. A future without digital violence is not a utopia, but a realistic goal that requires consistent effort. Every step in this direction, from improving moderation algorithms to the simple act of supporting a friend who has experienced bullying, brings us closer to an internet that unites rather than divides people.